got a good job now, and no reason to feel bad. No more working at a supermarket or driving around as a pizza delivery man, which I used to do for a while. That's what happens when you leave school without a diploma, Ma would say. Good old Ma. I even actually thought about writing her one of those special letters. But it all has changed. Since then, I've even had a ride in a private jet. So, how could things be bad? You know what Mr. Sharpton told me that night in his car? It's not just a job, Dink, it's an adventure. And he was right. He was right about that. I suppose you're wondering about the salary of this famous job. Well, I have to tell you, there's not much money in it. But a job isn't just about money or getting a promotion. That's what Mr. Sharpton told me. Mr. Sharpton said that a real job is about the benefits. He said that's where the power is. I only saw him once, sitting behind the wheel of his big old Mercedes-Benz, but sometimes once is enough. I've got my own house. That's the benefit number one. I call Ma sometimes, ask how she is, but I've never invited her here. I don't even have to go see her unless I want to. But I don't want to. If you knew my mother, you wouldn't want to either. Mostly, I just stay in here. There's only one bedroom, but it's still an excellent house. I'd like my friends to see it, but I can't call them. I can call my Ma, and I have an emergency number if anything ever goes wrong, or if I think somebody's getting too curious about the business. But I can't call any of my old friends. It's Mr. Sharpton's rules. But it doesn't matter. How many 19-year-old high school dropouts do you know who have their own houses? And a new car? That's what I really wonder about. I do get some money, by the way. More than enough for my needs. I watch TV shows every day while I'm eating my lunch, and on Thursdays, I hear how the mail slot opens, and something is dropped through it. I don't do anything then. I'm not allowed to. Like Mr. Sharpton said, these are the rules, Dink. I just watch my shows on TV. I'm especially careful to stay in the living room on Thursdays. Lying on the floor under the mail slot, there's always a white envelope. Nothing is written on the front. Inside there will be $70. That's my money for the week. Here's what I do with it. I go to the movies twice, always in the afternoon when it's cheaper. On Saturdays, I fill up my Honda with gas. I don't drive much. I'll eat out maybe 4 times a week at some fast food restaurant, either at breakfast or at dinner. Once a week I dress up and have a fancy meal at a fancy place. Then I might buy a book or a magazine. Nothing really special. Some of the money that's left I might use to buy a CD or a candy bar or two, or do some other small shopping at the mall. I sometimes think of ordering a pizza, but it's against Transcorp's rules. As you can see, I don't need much money. When it is Thursday morning again, I usually have some money left from the previous week. What do I do with it then? I drop the coins down the drain in front of my house at night and put the bills in the garbage. That's the rule. But one day it'll be over because I'll be gone. I'm not going to spend my life in this city, I can tell you that. I'm leaving, and soon, one way or the other. Dinky's Day Board. That's another benefit. I write down whatever I want during the week and I get everything I ask for. Maybe I'll get bored with that eventually, but right now I like it. I might, for example, write down new Bruce Willis video, or new CD player, or something like that. And I get them even before anyone else can. If I write down sports shirt on the day board, there it is when I get back to the house on Friday night, always in one of the nice colors I like. If I write down new jeans, I get those. If I want some shampoo, I write the name on Dinky's day board, and it's in my bathroom when I get home. Here's something funny. Once I wrote down Rembrandt painting on the day board. Then I spent the afternoon at the movies and walking in the park, thinking how the cleaners would bring me my own Rembrandt. But my Rembrandt was on the living room wall when I got home. My heart was beating fast as I walked across the room toward it. When I got closer, I saw it was just a copy. You know, a reproduction. I was disappointed, but not very. I mean, it was a Rembrandt, just not an original Rembrandt. Another time I wrote, autographed photo of Nicole Kidman on the day board. I think she's the best. And when I got home that day, there was a picture of her on the fridge. And that time, it was the real thing. I know because it said, to Dinky Earnshaw, with love and kisses from Nicole. In a job like this, if I worked hard and really wanted it, there might be a real Rembrandt on my wall someday. Sure, in a way that's the scary part. I never have to make grocery lists. The cleaners know what I like, mostly ordinary food. If I want something special, I write it down on Dinky's day board. Toilet paper, soap, I never have to write any of that down. It just appears. Very eventual, don't you think? I have never seen the cleaners, and I have never seen the guy who delivers my $70 every Thursday. I never want to see them either. I don't need to, for one thing. For another, I'm afraid of them. Just like I was afraid of Mr. Sharpton in his big gray Mercedes on the night I went out to meet him. While I'm away, the cleaners are doing their job. Wash the dishes, wash the floors, wash the dirty clothes, change the bed, put fresh towels, put food into the fridge, etc. It's like living in a hotel with the world's most efficient service. The one place they don't enter much is the study. I keep that room dark. Someone vacuums the floor in there and empties the waste paper basket, but no one has ever moved any of the papers that I keep on the desk. Never. Also, if the computer is on when I leave, it is still on when I come back. If it was off when I left, it's off when I come back. They don't do much in Dinky's study. Maybe the cleaners are a little afraid of me, too. One night I got the call that changed my life. Ma was out with her girlfriends playing bingo. I was alone at home, watching a movie on TV. The phone rang, and I picked it up. "Hello, Mr. Earnshaw," a man's voice said. It was one I'd never heard before, but it didn't seem strange. "Can I help you?" I asked, surprised that the stranger knew my last name. "And if you wanted my mother, I can take a message because she's out, playing bingo, I know. No, I want you, Mr. Earnshaw. I want to offer you a job." "But I've got a job," I said, too surprised to say anything else. "Sorry." "Delivering pizza?" the man said, amused. "Well, I suppose you can call that a job." "Who are you, mister?" I asked, annoyed. "My name is Sharpton. May I call you Dink?" "Sure," I said. "I want to make you the best job offer you've ever had. It's not just a job, Dink. It's an adventure. But this is a discussion we must have face to face. Will you meet me?" "Are you a queer?" I asked. "No. You can put the phone down and go look in your front hall." That was crazy. But what did I have to lose? I did what he said and found an envelope there. Someone had pushed it through the mail slot while I was watching TV. That was the first envelope of many, but of course I didn't know that then. I opened it and found $70 and a note. This can be the beginning of a great career, I thought, and went back into the living room, still looking at the money. I picked up the phone. "What's this all about?" I asked Mr. Sharpton. "What's the $70 for?" "The money is yours," Mr. Sharpton said. "But I'll let you a secret, Dink. This job isn't just about money. A real job is about the benefits. That's where the power is. So meet me, and I'll make you an offer that will change your life if you take it. That will open the door to a new life, in fact. You can ask all the questions you like, but I must say that you probably won't get all the answers." "Sounds interesting but unreal," I said carefully. Mr. Sharpton laughed. "Everything's eventual, Dink," he said, "or can be for the right person." "You think so?" "I know it." So we arranged a meeting that night at the local supermarket parking lot, some privacy in a public place. Only that place meant so much to me, and I wondered if he knew. If he knew about my fight with Skipper, the guy I had worked with. Maybe he was from the police, investigating his accident, or... "You'll know the car. It's a big gray Mercedes." I hung up, put on my coat, and wrote a note for Ma before leaving. "Went out to see some guys," I wrote. "We'll be back by midnight." I planned to be back before midnight, but if something happened to me, something bad, I wanted to make sure Ma would call the police. There are two kinds of scared. At least that's my theory. There's TV scared, and there's really scared. I think we mostly get TV scared. We don't get really scared. Why? Because really bad things only happen to the people on TV. When I saw that big gray Mercedes, the only car in the empty parking lot, I got really scared for the first time in my life. Mr. Sharpton's car was huge and expensive, the car that costs $120,000 these days. I drove my little Ford toward it, my heart beating fast. The place brought back so many memories that I suddenly wanted to turn around and get the hell out of there. But somehow I couldn't. I parked beside the Mercedes and rolled my window down. At the same time, the driver's side window of the Mercedes rolled down too. We looked at each other, me and Mr. Sharpton, like a couple of old friends. I don't remember much about him now. He was thin, and he was wearing a suit. A good one, I think. Still, the suit calmed me a little. I guess that I had this idea that a suit meant business, and not the police. "Hello, Dink," he said. "I'm Mr. Sharpton. Come in here and sit down." I didn't plan to, but he only looked at me, and after a few seconds I turned off the Ford and got out. I don't know exactly why, but I did. I was more scared than ever, I can tell you that. Really scared. Maybe that was why he could make me to do what he wanted. I stood before Mr. Sharpton's car for a minute, looking at the supermarket and thinking about Skipper and how we used to work there together. He was tall, blonde, and muscular. He had always teased me and pushed me and pulled my hair. You know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. He was like a bully at school, only older. I couldn't really fight with him because he was much bigger, heavier than me. Once I turned around when he pulled my hair, and he must have seen something on my face because his teasing smile disappeared and he raised his fists. The other guys were just looking at us, and I knew that none of them would help. "Come on," Skipper said. "Come on, you want to fight me? Come on, sure, I'll fight you." So he punched me a bit with his fists, smashing my fingers. Then he walked away. It was only a few days later, after that Skipper was lying on satin in the Methodist church. He brought it on himself. That's what I thought then. "Remembering the good old days?" Mr. Sharpton asked. I opened the door of the Mercedes and got in. I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't matter. What do you want with me? The answer to your question is that I'm sort of a headhunter and a destiny. And you're a valuable person, Dink. You might not believe that, but it's true. What's this offer you were talking about? Tell me what happened to Skipper Brannigan first. Oh God, my worst fear came true. He couldn't know. Nobody could. But somehow he did. Come on, tell me. I didn't do anything, I said. Skipper had an accident, that's all. He was driving home and he went off the road. His car fell into the river. They found water in his lungs, so I guess he drowned. And some people say it wasn't an accident, that he killed himself, but I don't think so. Skipper was getting too much fun out of life to kill himself. Yes, you were part of his fun, weren't you? I didn't say anything. If you're worried that I'm a cop, you shouldn't. And I gave you money, remember? But no one would believe what really happened to young Mr. Brannigan anyway. Not even if you confessed. Would they? No, I whispered. I put up with a lot. Finally, I couldn't do it anymore. He made me. He brought it on himself. Tell me what happened, Mr. Sharpton said. I wrote him a letter, I said. A special letter. Yes, very special letter. And what did you put in it so it could only work on him? I knew what he meant, but there was more to it than that. When you wrote personal letters, you made them powerful. You made them lethal. His sister's name, I said. His sister, Debbie. I've always had something like a gift, and I knew it, but I didn't know how to use it or what its name was or what it meant. And I knew I had to keep quiet about it, because other people didn't have it. I thought they might put me in jail. I remember once, I might have been 3 or 4, standing in my room by the dirty window and looking out at the yard, and there were these flies flying around at the top of the window. I didn't like the sound, but I couldn't reach high enough make them go away. So instead of that, I made 2 triangles on the glass, and I made another special round shape to hold the triangles together. And when I did that, the flies dropped dead. Things like that happened from time to time, but never on purpose. Never because I made it happen. The first time I remember doing something on purpose, before Skipper, was when I used my gift on Mrs. Bukowski's dog, a mean boxer. Mrs. Bukowski lived on the corner of our street, and her dog was so dangerous that every kid was afraid of it. It barked at everyone who went by. Once the dog even bit the paper boy. I hated that dog the way I hated Skipper. I had to pass by Mrs. Bukowski's every day on my way to school, and I was so terrified. Then one day I woke up with an idea. It was right there. I woke up with it, that's all. I had the whole clear thing in my mind, words with triangles around them and circles over them, special circles to hold them together. I was too excited to be scared of Mrs. Bukowski's dog that day. I stopped in front of her house, took out a piece of chalk, and for the next 5 minutes or so, I wrote on the sidewalk. I wrote words I'd never heard and drew shapes I'd never seen. I wrote and drew until the chalk was almost gone. Mrs. Bukowski's dog didn't die like the flies. It barked at me the whole time, but I didn't notice. At the end, I realized I had to make it stronger, and the way to do that was to make it just for the dog. I didn't know its name, so I wrote Boxer with the last of the chalk. Then I looked at the dog. It was still lively, barking and jumping, but that didn't bother me. I went back home, knowing that Mrs. Bukowski's dog would soon be dead. 3 days later, the dog was dead. Nobody ever talked about it, and nobody ever noticed the strange writings on the sidewalk. I didn't tell Mr. Sharpton all that, but I told him what he wanted to know about Skipper. I had decided I could trust him. Maybe that secret part of me knew I could trust him, but I don't think so. Plus, it was what he said. Even if they arrested me, who would believe Skipper Brannigan had died because of a letter I sent him? When I was done, there was silence between us for a long time. At last, Mr. Sharpton said, "He deserved it. You know that, don't you?" "But how did you know about me?" I asked. "Once you were noticed, all it took was a little detective work. We have certain people who look for guys like you," he said. "They can see you, Dink, or sense you, or whatever it is they do." "But what?" He raised his hand. "I told you that you wouldn't get all the answers, but I can tell you a couple of things. I work for an organization called the Trans Corporation. Our job is to get rid of the world's bad guys. The big ones, of course, not like your Skipper." I didn't say anything then, but I knew already I was going to say yes to his proposal. Whatever it was, I was going to say yes. "You are a tranny. You have this trait to get into trance. We have found 21 of people like you, but all of them have different abilities. The ability to see the future, for example, or the ability to see the past. We have a guy who knows who killed John F. Kennedy, and it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. It was, in fact, a woman. There are other abilities, and no one knows how many. We don't know, certainly. This is a new world, but trance is different. It's much rarer. We believe that there may only be one tranny in 8 million people." That took my breath away. I was really special, wasn't I? "We think there may be no more than 3,000 so-called trannies in the whole world. We're finding them one by one. It's slow work. We're finding trannies and we're putting them to work. That's what we want to do with you, Dink. Put you to work. We want to help you focus on your talent and use it for the improvement of the mankind. You won't be able to see any of your old friends again, and there's not much money in it, but there's a lot of satisfaction." By then, I started to get excited. My heart was beating fast, but it wasn't fear. My doubts were gone. "So tell me about it," I said. "Make me an offer I can't refuse." And that's what he did. 3 weeks later, I was on a plane for the first time in my life. Not just a plane, but a private jet. I spent a week away from home in training, and I was homesick. Really homesick. Ma wasn't the one that I missed. You'd think we would have been close. Us against the world. But my mother was never very loving or comforting. She was always more interested in her friends than me, and her beauty shop, and Friday bingo nights. Mr. Sharpton called Ma and told her that I'd been chosen for the Trans Corporation's computer training, a special program for non-diploma kids with potential. The story was quite believable. I was good at programming and computers. So Ma believed it, and I didn't miss her much, but I missed my friends and my town. I thought I'd meet some other people like me there, but even if there were other trannies like me, they kept us separated. It was about killing people. That's what I was training for. I just had to remember that my targets were bad guys, dictators, and spies, and serial killers. Plus, it wasn't personal. No guns, no knives, no blood, nothing like that. I never saw Mr. Sharpton again, but I talked to him on the phone every day of the week. I was there. He gave me his number the night we talked in his Mercedes and told me to call him any time, even at 3 in the morning, if I was feeling upset. Once I did that. I told him that some of the things they were doing to me were quite strange. The test with the flashing lights, for example. I fell asleep in the middle of it, I said. And when I woke up, I had a headache, and it was hard to think. I think they hypnotized me. Maybe they did. Probably they did, Mr. Sharpton said. But why? Why would they? I'm doing everything they ask, so why would they want to hypnotize me? I don't know, but I think they're programming you. I thanked him and hung up. I also wanted to tell him that I'd been drugged, but I didn't. It was probably for my own good. The next day, one of the doctors, Dr. Wentworth, came to see me. He explained that they had been giving me certain basic instructions. In my case, they were instructions about the computer programs I'd be using. He asked me if I had any other questions. I said no. I didn't know what else to ask anyway. I liked it there in the training center, and I was excited by the future. A new job, a new house, a new town. I had one more talk on the phone with Mr. Sharpton that I should mention. That was just a day before my second flight to the city, where a guy was waiting with the keys to my new house. By then I knew about the cleaners and the money rules, and I knew whom to call if I had a problem. I had maps, a list of restaurants, directions to the cinema and the mall. Mr. Sharpton, I don't know what to do, I said. When I try to imagine what I'm going to do in that city, I am lost. Help people, you said. Make the world a better place. Get rid of the skippers. All that is great, but I don't know how to do it. I can't help you, Dink, he said. What do you mean? You've got to help me. You will know what to do, he said. When the time comes, you will. Trust me, Dink. Trust me, and trust yourself. So I did. But just lately, things haven't been so good. Not so good at all. That Neff, all the bad things started with him. I wish I'd never seen his picture. My first week, I did nothing. Absolutely nothing. I didn't even go to the movies. When the cleaners came, I just went to the park and sat on a bench and felt like the whole world was watching me. When it was time to get rid of my extra money on Thursday, I threw more than $50 in the garbage. I slept badly that week. I had nightmares. Then, from time to time, I'd go to my little study. I didn't want to, but I went anyway. I'd stand there and look at the dark computer screen and feel this fear. Then, about 10 days after I moved in, I had a dream. I don't remember what it was, but I woke up smiling. I immediately went into my study, turned on the computer, and opened the window marked Tools. There was a program in there called Dinky's Notebook. I started it, and all my symbols were there, circles, triangles, and hundreds more. Thousands more. Maybe millions more. All I know is that all at once it was there for me. I had a great big computer to work with instead of a little piece of chalk, and all I had to do was type the words and draw the symbols. I wrote. I arranged symbols, and when it was done, I had a letter. One of the special letters. But a letter to who? A letter to where? Then I realized it didn't matter. There were many people the letter could go to. But at first it had to be personalized. I don't know how I knew that. I just did. I decided to start with Cincinnati. I don't know why. I opened a tools program called Dinky Mail, and now the words Dinky Mail Ready were displayed on the screen. I typed Cincinnati and clicked Execute. No listings. Cincinnati, the computer said. Okay, no problem. Let's try Columbus, I thought. And yes. 2 listings, Columbus. There were 2 links and 2 email addresses. I clicked on the top link, curious and a little afraid. There was only one word, muffin. But then I knew. Muffin was Mr. Columbus's pet. Maybe a cat. I added Muffin to my letter. Perfect. Did I know who Mr. Columbus was, or what he had done, or what was going to happen to him? I did not. I was just doing my job. That was all. Just doing my job. I clicked on the email address of Mr. Columbus. Email address found. Send Dinky Mail, yes or no. I clicked yes. The computer displayed sending Dinky Mail and then Dinky Mail sent. That was all. That night I called Mr. Sharpton and said, I'm working. That's good, Dink. Yeah, I said. But Mr. Sharpton, yes? Email's not 100% private, you know. What if somebody sees it? Well, even if they do, nothing can happen to someone else who reads such a message because it's personalized. But the message will look like a suspicious code. He laughed at that. Let them try to break it, Dinky. Let them try. Sometimes I had to send not just emails, but actual letters, too. Professor Ann Tevich, University of New Mexico. Mr. Andrew Neff, The New York Post, New York. Billy Unger, General Delivery, Vermont. I wondered what crime could a university professor be involved in, or if that Ann Tevich had a family, perhaps her husband, perhaps her son, perhaps her father, someone named Simon. But I never wondered too much. I didn't have to. I could have gone on like that for a long time, maybe forever, going to afternoon movies, enjoying my little house, and dreaming about more benefits. Except one day I woke up feeling restless. I worked for an hour or so, then turned off the computer and went to a store to get a magazine or a candy bar. As I got there, a guy was coming out, reading a newspaper. I never read the newspapers myself. Why bother? There are the same old problems: wars, terrorists, political scandals. I wouldn't have seen this story because it was at the bottom of the front page, but this guy with the newspaper somehow held it right into my face. There was a picture of an older guy, smoking a pipe and smiling. He looked like a good guy. And the headline over the photo said, "Neff suicide still puzzles." For a second or two, I thought I'd just go home and get some sleep. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know any more about that older guy than I already did. Besides, there must be thousands of Neffs in this country. This one didn't have to be the Neff I knew about, the one who loved listening to Frank Sinatra. But I went inside the store and bought the newspaper. On the way home, I had a strange thought that I didn't want a newspaper with Andrew Neff's picture on the front page to be found by the cleaners in my trash. So I went to the park instead of home. I sat on a bench and read the story, and when I was done, I left the paper on the bench. I didn't even like doing that because if Mr. Sharpton has got a guy following me around and checking on every little thing I do, then I'm in trouble. There was no doubt that Andrew Neff, a journalist, had committed suicide. He left no note, though. His colleagues were puzzled. He was the smartest and the most honest guy I've ever known, a guy named Pete Hamill said. I have no idea why Andy did such a thing. Neff was a liberal. He wrote a column in which he talked about social changes needed in New York. Near the end of his life, he'd been writing against the military and the terrorists. That was all. I went home, all the time thinking about Andrew Neff. He was smart, he was honest, and I had killed him. Neff had opened my letter, and it had got into his head somehow. He deserved it. That's what Mr. Sharpton said about Skipper, and maybe he was right. That time. But did Neff deserve it? Was there something about him that I didn't know? We want to help you use your talent for the improvement of the mankind, Mr. Sharpton said, and I believed him. I went to the public library around 2 o'clock. They had a computer room in the library where you could get on the internet. It took me only a couple of minutes to find Anne Tevich and the report of her death. Professor Tevich had been a pretty lady, blonde, only 37. That made me feel sad and guilty. She had a car accident, just like Skipper. There was no alcohol in her blood, and her marriage was happy. No kids, at least. Thank God. Professor Anne Tevich, a clinical biologist, had been a talented AIDS researcher. Billy Unger was also easy to find. He was a pacifist. He wrote letters to newspapers in which he protested against the war in Vietnam. Then, the Democrats asked him to run for the U.S. Senate. But he died. His death was not an accident. It was suicide because the guy jumped from the roof of a tall apartment building. Yeah, right. I left the library and thought I'd go home. Instead, I went back to the same park again. I sat there until the sun was low. If certain people were following me, they might wonder why I changed the routine. So I got up, went home, had dinner, and turned on my TV. I sat on the sofa beneath my fake Rembrandt and watched the show. I thought about things. About a newspaper columnist with liberal ideas. About a talented AIDS researcher. About an old pacifist who had planned to be a senator. There was other stuff to think about, too. How could you hypnotize a guy or drug him to keep him from asking any of the wrong questions or doing any of the wrong things? How could you make sure that this guy wouldn't run away if he happened to know the truth? You'd do that by setting him in a moneyless life where rule number 1 was to get rid of any extra money, even the change. How many times did I press the yes button? 200 times? I realized for the first time that I was a murderer, a mass murderer. Good for mankind? Bad for mankind? Who can judge? Mr. Sharpton? His bosses? Their bosses? And does it matter? I decided that didn't matter. I also decided that I'd been doing what I was doing not because I was hypnotized or drugged, but because I loved doing this. And because I could. I think about what has happened to me, and sometimes I hate myself, and sometimes I'm scared, and sometimes I'm just embarrassed. Trust me, Mr. Sharpton said, and I did. And of course, I'm still doing it. Yes. I thought at first that I wouldn't, but once I sat down in front of the computer, I was lost in it. I can't stop. Sometimes I tell myself that if I stop, they'll know, and the cleaners will come and clean up me this time. So I try to be positive. No people, just targets. I'm just another tool. Just the button someone pushes. That's true. I know it is. Horrible, but true. I thought of calling Mr. Sharpton and saying, "You lied to me about how I could make the world a better place by getting rid of people like Skipper. The truth is, you're the guys like Skipper. I've already killed over 200 people. And what did it cost Transcorp? A little house, $70 a week, and a Honda, plus cable TV. So what am I going to do? Oh God, what am I going to do? It's been 2 weeks now. 2 weeks of living in a nightmare. Then this morning, there was something in the mail. Not a letter, but some advertising leaflet. I opened it, and something fell out. A note. "Do you want out?" It read. "If yes, send message." "Don't Stand So Close to Me" is best police song. My heart was beating fast, the way it did on the day I came into my house and saw the Rembrandt over the sofa. Below the message, someone had drawn a shape. It was harmless by itself, but looking at it still made me jump. It was a real message. The shape proved it. But who had it come from? And how did they know about me? I went into my study thinking. A message in an advertising leaflet. That meant that it was someone close, someone in town. I turned on my computer to see if there was anything there. There was. For just a moment, something flashed on my screen. A shape. I sent the message about the best police song and added my own shape. The only thing left to say is that I'm really sorry for what I've done, even for what I did to Skipper. I'd take it back if I could. I didn't know what I was doing. I know that's a poor excuse, but it's the only one I have. But I have to write one more special letter, the most special of all. I have Mr. Sharpton's email address, and I have something even better. I know just enough about him. I know what to add to his letter to make it more personal. I close my eyes and see one word, and it's the only word that matters.